Most academics do not criticize the holy doctrine of diversity. But a recent article in the College Fix reports that a lawyer named Daniel Ortner is considering suing the University of California at Berkeley for forcing job applicants to assent to what he calls the equivalent of loyalty oaths. Applicants for many positions at UC-Berkeley and elsewhere are required to demonstrate their allegiance to social justice, the principle that wealth and opportunities should be redistributed from members of so-called oppressor groups, mainly white men, to members of so-called oppressed groups, mainly women and people of color. On a page titled Berkeley Diversity, the university states that, quote, at a time when access and inclusion are unequal, end quote, the university is committed to, quote, closing opportunity gaps for our most marginalized groups, end quote. The article about the possible lawsuit is well worth reading for what it shows about the explicit intention of many university departments to weed out white male applicants from job searches in order to increase racial and gender diversity. This process has been going on for decades, and it could be argued that the diversity statement, which allows candidates to clarify how they are marginalized, is merely a more subtle instrument in the now well-entrenched and richly funded social justice project. But a close look at the instructions concerning diversity statements shows that another equally important purpose is to purge all non-left-wing individuals from college campuses. Take a look at a job advertisement for a professor position in the astronomy department at UC-Berkeley, and it soon becomes clear that the ad is far less focused on academic qualifications than on demonstrated commitment to the principles of diversity, inclusion, and equity, or DIE for short. Although the word excellence does appear in the job ad, it is mentioned in such a way as to be closely linked to ideological conformity. We are told that, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion are core values at UC-Berkeley and the Department of Astronomy. Our department strives for excellence by fostering a community of faculty, students, and staff who share our commitment to these values, end quote. One might ask why a commitment to these values, whether they're admirable or not, would have anything to do with excellence in astronomy research. No argument is made in support of that statement, and no argument will be made. It's an article of faith. The job ad says nothing about whether there are other core values of UC-Berkeley, nothing about a commitment to scientific objectivity or academic freedom or the unfettered pursuit of knowledge. Instead, it assures readers that the university is, quote, responsive to family needs of faculty, end quote. And it mentions that, quote, applications from women and candidates in other underrepresented groups are especially encouraged, end quote. It also stresses that the University of California is an equal opportunity affirmative action employer. So far, so predictable. This is nothing we haven't known about for decades, but the advertisement doesn't stop there. It goes much further in various hyperlinked pages to make clear how extensively the diversity mandate governs the entire hiring process. It explains in a document outlining the position requirements that all candidates for the astronomy position must submit a, quote, statement on your contributions to diversity, equity, and inclusion, including information about your understanding of these topics, your record of activities to date, and your specific plans and goals for advancing equity and inclusion if hired at Berkeley, end quote. In a linked document, prospective job candidates are informed that their diversity statement will be evaluated in 3 main areas. 1, the candidates' ability to articulate diversity concepts, including their command of demographic data related to diversity in higher education. 2, their track record as advocates, ideally including, quote, multiple examples of action from undergraduate through current career stage, end quote. And 3, their, quote, concrete goals, plans, and priorities, end quote, for advancing diversity at UC-Berkeley. Candidates are told that, quote, a typical strong statement is 2 to 3 pages in length and includes specific, detailed examples and descriptions, end quote. So this is not about pledging that you are a well-intentioned person who supports equal opportunities for all, or even that you're an enthusiastic member of the Democratic Party. This is about showing that you have fully embraced in word and deed the arcane and often extremely subjective, non-scientific, and even demonstrably false and bigoted theories of intersectional feminism. Candidates are told explicitly that they should be able to outline such matters as, quote, new pedagogies and classroom strategies to advance equity and inclusion, end quote. If that sounds as if perhaps instructors are being encouraged to treat women and people of color in their classrooms differently, i.e. with greater encouragement and support than for white men, well, you're not far off base. Candidates are explicitly told that they will be expected to provide strategies for, quote, mentoring and supporting the advancement and professional development of underrepresented students or postdocs, end quote. In other words, to put it crudely, find an African American woman or the equivalent and promote her like crazy. Even candidates' research subjects should preferably have a social justice angle. Candidates are encouraged to highlight, quote, research focused on underserved communities, end quote. A further linked document from the Berkeley Office for Faculty Equity and Welfare provides copious detail about how a hiring committee should rate applicants for positions at Berkeley by making the diversity statement their primary evaluative standard. This document lectures the old fogies in the department that although they may have been hired at a time when all that mattered was whether or not you knew your science, those days are gone. Quote, while faculty who were hired years ago may not have been evaluated in this way, the document explains, Berkeley is now exclusively interested in hiring, quote, excellent contributors to advancing equity and inclusion for all, end quote. And if you're not sure how a zeal for combating male privilege or promoting female ways of knowing can aid in understanding the origins of the universe or the lifespan of a quasar, that's your problem. This document advises hiring committee members to be unwavering in monitoring ideological compliance in all prospective candidates, no matter how brilliant the candidate, no matter how extensive their record of scientific achievements. No one should be considered for the job, according to this document, if they are not politically on board. Members are explicitly advised to, quote, consider creating a cutoff score for the diversity statement, quote, below which a candidate would not move forward in the search process. Berkeley even provides specific examples of how diversity statements should be scored from 1, meaning least impressive, to 5, most impressive. And I strongly encourage interested listeners to view this astounding document and all the hyperlinked pages in their entirety. It is made crystal clear in this document that simply writing in your application that you treat all people equally, or believe all people have the capacity to make important contributions to science, that will lead to your rejection from the application process as insufficiently informed and engaged. To reach the acceptable 4 to 5 high score, according to this Marxist manual of mind control, you will need to, quote, demonstrate sophisticated thinking about the underrepresentation of groups in academia and structural barriers to success, e.g. racism, sexism, homophobia, etc. You will also need a robust record of social justice activism, ideally extending back to your undergraduate days. And of course, you also need a detailed plan for what you're going to do at Berkeley if hired. The hiring document mentions that, quote, for example, a new assistant professor may plan to undertake one major activity within the department, conduct outreach to hire a diverse group of students to work in their lab, seek to mentor several underrepresented students, and co-chair a subcommittee or lead a workshop for a national conference, end quote. One might well wonder how this new hire will be able to contribute at all to astronomy research at Berkeley, given how busy that person will be organizing anti-racism workshops and recruiting diverse students for their lab and for collaborative work with other academics. A friend of mine has informed me that 2 tiers are being created in astronomy departments, one for the regular academics, mostly men who pursue astronomy research, and the other for the social justice warriors who spend their time conducting surveys and giving talks about diversity. It's also hard reading this document not to notice that the new hire will be pressured, if not in fact required, to see students and collaborators not primarily as individuals, whether appropriately talented or not, but as faceless members of designated groups, valuable not for their potential as scientists, but for adding a much-needed black or brown or female or gender non-conforming face to the lab. Will that improve research excellence at Berkeley? Will it lay the groundwork for cutting-edge work? I'll leave that to you to decide. One might ask whether there is any evidence at all for the much-touted connection between excellence and ethnic and gender diversity. As an astrophysicist friend of mine has noted, China and Japan are doing pretty well in STEM without any diversity. The moon landing was not the product of diversity, and neither were discoveries in electromagnetism, thermodynamics, quantum physics, or general relativity. One study entitled Ethnic Diversity Increases Scientific Impact, published in June of 2018, did find that a more ethnically diverse set of authors had overall about a 10% higher chance of producing a highly cited paper than a team that was more homogeneous. But it's far from clear that the fact of ethnic diversity was itself the necessary and sufficient condition for the more cited research. There might well have been other factors, perhaps that the more ethnically diverse teams had members with larger scientific networks, which led to the higher number of citations. What we do know is that in the absence of any scientifically sound evidence of the benefits of racial and gender diversity, enormous public money and energy are being poured into the social justice vision for the university, not just at Berkeley or in California as a whole, but all across the Western world as universities abandon their commitment to individual ability in favor of political correctness. In 2018, Vanderbilt University's Center for Teaching website affirmed that, quote, increasingly institutions of higher education are becoming more intentional and programmatic about their efforts to embrace principles of inclusion, equity, justice, and diversity throughout campus life, end quote. And in 2019, the Chronicle of Higher Education repeated that, quote, more colleges are asking scholars for diversity statements, end quote. A 2019 article by influential astronomer and professor at the Australian National University, Lisa Cooley, in the journal Nature Astronomy is titled Diversity and Inclusion in Australian Astronomy. Predictably, the article celebrates the plethora of diversity initiatives, policies, surveys, reports, and action plans, including many female-only astronomy job positions, and calls for much more to be done for women and minorities. 30 years ago, senior astronomy professors would have been expected to write articles for Nature about scientific discoveries. Now, they devote themselves to the new religion and force others to do the same. How long all of this can continue is far from clear, but the fact is that diversity is not a whim of one wacky California college. It is the wave of the future, lavishly funded, seemingly unstoppable, largely immune to criticism, and determined to sweep away everything in its path, including the research preeminence and even research soundness of the scientific institutions of the West. They're popping the corks on the champagne bottles in South Korea, China, Japan, and India. Perhaps only the lawyers can save us now.